News. I don't know if you saw this, but my band is playing at the Indiana State Capitol on the 28th, this very month. And we're doing that because Sean Foyt, this Christian nationalist musician, has been playing at state capitol buildings, declaring this a Christian nation and saying that our politicians need to be Christian, all of that. And so it was actually Lauren Boebert who let him play in the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C., and it's politicians like her that are opening Capitol grounds to now my band, Satanic Planet, going out and playing at the same Capitol buildings where they played. So, I mean, keep your eyes open. We're going to be live streaming the event on our website, thesatanictemple.tv, on the 28th at noon and Eastern time when it happens. But I'm wondering what the turnout will be for that. We can't sell tickets, so people can any random idiot off the street can show up, and they probably will. But that should be a wild time.
I love that.
That is so great. So in a weird way, she's sort of your hype man.
Well, in a weird way, they create these opportunities for me. And the thing is I make a point of thanking them when we do these things, because if they want to pander to their audience who's too simple to understand that they've opened the door for us, then we can leave it to them to explain to that same audience how they didn't actually intend for the outcome of Satanic Planet playing at their venues.
Well, and speaking of audiences that sometimes you do something that goes a little over their head. The guy, his name escapes me, but this is relatively recently. I think it was on May, but you got a little zinger on in the last time you were on Fox News. You were talking with what's his name, Lawrence Jones. He was after our time, I think. And I do love for the fact that I think at the end of it he said he'd be praying for you. I want you to know that I pray for you every night, and to no avail. But you said that you had, I don't know if do we have the video? I sent it separately. If not, it was basically, and it would completely, you could tell he had no idea what you were talking about. But they were talking about ongoing litigation against the After School Satan Club, and you had here we go.
What do you seek to do in schools all across America? Not specifically in that case.
Well, I won't speak to the issues of what we do in schools if we're going to have a discussion about litigation that nobody wants to have. I have 787.5 million questions for you, but I can speak about the Satanic Temple in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw you guys ripping.
All right, now if you look at, and now of course you're referring to the amount per the decimal point of how much Fox News had to pay to Dominion for their recent lawsuit, talking about the line of their machines being rigged in the 2020 election. He had no clue what you were talking about. I was almost disappointed because I would have preferred sort of oh, guys, cut his mic or something like that, but absolutely not. It just went right over his head.
Your delivery was great.
Yes.
I think that's why.
The show, and I wasn't going to come on because the ACLU was working on that litigation for our after-school clubs, and they asked me not to speak about that issue, and that's what they wanted to talk about. So I was speaking to the producers beforehand, and they said, okay, we'll give you your questions in advance, which is something Fox has never done.
Yes.
So they give me these questions in advance, and they guarantee me they say, we're not going to talk about that. So as soon as I get on, none of the questions that they sent in advance were asked, and he goes straight to the after-school Satan clubs. And I think in his mind, the thinking was that, what could I do? I was going to have to answer those questions, but then I didn't. And then I went, of course, in a direction they didn't want to go either.
Oh, it's good, so good. Aside from the upcoming concert, what else is going on from your end? What do we have to look forward to?
Well, that's really what I'm concentrating on right now, because we were talking about doing all the capitals that Sean Foyt has done, and he's done quite a few. But, we still have an abortion clinic in New Mexico, and that got very little news coverage. It's a pharmaceutical abortion clinic, a telehealth clinic. People call in and they get their abortion-inducing pharmaceuticals if they need them. And we're going to make the legal argument that we can distribute that wherever we like as a matter of religious liberty. Our after-school clubs have been getting a lot of traction, starting a lot of outrage. I don't know if they've been really educating people in the way we intended to get people to start thinking more clearly about the ramifications of opening the doors to religious groups on public grounds. That seems to really go over a lot of people's heads. We've got Oklahoma now opening up religious charter schools, and we're looking at the potential of doing that also on our own. So there's really no shortage of things going on. And of course, we have to see what happens in the upcoming presidential election, where that leaves us insofar as pluralism and actual religious liberty is concerned. So we're always going to have our work cut out for us.
It's a lot to look forward to. But I remember when you were talking with Lawrence Jones, and you say this quite often, and I very much like it. And boy, does it fall on deaf ears. Of course, at the end, he's just like, so now, well, who will the, where does the temple stand as far as the upcoming election is concerned? And you talk to him as if he were a child. He's like, well, actually, we're a religious organization, so we're not supposed to come out for or against any politicians, and that's how it's supposed to go, really, with any tax-free religious organization. And that just we seem to be forgetting that left and right these days.
Well, also, if you notice on that clip, when he was saying that, they already had queued up scrolling text at the bottom of the screen saying satanic religious leader tells audience who he endorses for president or something like that. So not only did they not ask me the questions they said they were going to ask me, but those questions weren't off the cuff either. So their producers just totally lied to me from start to finish, and they knew that they were lying to me from the start. So I think in their desperation, that's how Fox is performing now. I knew they were pretty desperate after Tucker Carlson. Their ratings plummeted. And I don't know how desperate they still are. But to me, that was really unprofessional behavior.
They have the Chiron already on the ready.
Truly.
Oh, that's like Dewey defeats Truman. Maybe not in the same category, but it's still in the same wheelhouse.
Turns out Harvard University is the worst college for free speech. It received a, quote, abysmal rating. Harvard ranked last out of 248 colleges in a survey of more than 55,000 students across the U.S. Each year, the climate on college campuses grows more inhospitable to free speech, said FIRE, Director of Polling and Analytics, Sean Stevens. What does FIRE stand for? I don't know.
It's an acronym?
Yeah.
No, I know this one.
Oh,
it
you
was,
do?
Yeah. Or maybe I don't.
Yeah, it doesn't say it on here. Some of the most prestigious universities in our country have the most repressive administrations, Stevens added. Students should know that a college degree at certain schools may come at the expense of their free speech rights. Self-censorship is pervasive across the board, according to the survey. More than a quarter of students said they censor themselves at least a few times a week in conversations with friends. That's what I think is crazy. It's not even in the classroom. It's like with friends. 25
Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, I think.
Not. Bobby's giving me the thumbs up. That's it.
25% said they are more likely to self-censor now than they were when starting college. Up to 72% of students opposed allowing a conservative speaker on campus, depending on the topic, while up to 43% of students opposed allowing a liberal speaker on campus. At a time of national dialogue about abortion policy, 49% of students said they have difficulty discussing abortion on campus. If you want the best college for free speech, that's Michigan Technological University.
I told you.
Did you?
Oh, they're known. They're known. Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
But yeah, it turns out some of the worst performing institutions are among America's most influential schools, including Harvard, Georgetown, Northwestern, and Dartmouth. Dartmouth? Dartmouth.
That sounds like a bar accident, Dartmouth. What is your experience? Do you guys do a lot of work in colleges? Do you speak there a lot? Or is it just
Apparently not at Harvard.
Yeah.
Well, we had put together an event with a student group at Harvard back early in the earlier days of the Satanic Temple. And a student group that was having different religious organizations come and do different demonstrations of their faith or their practices, invited us over, and we were going to speak about the Black Mass. And we were talking about doing a reenactment of a Black Mass because we knew people would be offended and outraged. And we thought maybe if we presented it as a reenactment, whatever that means, rather than an actual ritual, that, you know, it would mitigate some of that offense that Boston Catholics would take.
Sure.
And that turned out not to be the case. There was so much outrage and uproar. This ended up being part of the film Hail Satan, the documentary about us. And we were eventually moved off campus, where we ended up doing the event at above a Chinese restaurant in Harvard Square.
Nice.
And the president of Harvard at the time, Drew Faust, this hypocritical, meandering, speaking, just vapid individual, said these horrible things about us, joined a counter protest against us at the time, and now she has the gall to write a book. Drew Faust. She's written a book about how she was against racial divisions and in the sexism of the 50s at the time she grew up in, which surely meant her parents had put that kind of viewpoint upon her because she didn't seem capable of individual thought or holding to principle. But other than that, you know, we didn't have much experience. I've been invited to speak at universities quite a bit, and I had spoken at Harvard quite a few times after that, and it wasn't controversial because we weren't doing a Black Mass event or anything like that, or we weren't doing anything ritualistic that was going to really get the Catholics outraged. But I do think that it's a real shame that people's views on free speech have become so censorious and prohibitive. And that, you know, I always felt that free speech was one of the prime issues of the liberal left, and that this was something that we would defend at all costs. And in fact, the disregard for free speech now is really kind of broken me of considering myself as having any right-left affiliation or political affiliation whatsoever, because I do feel it is so vital and so fundamental, and I think it is so backward to go to universities and try shouting down conservative speakers. And the ignorance I encounter from people who feel like I could only feel this way if I agree with the people who are speaking. They just can't see beyond this notion that maybe their tactics are wrong. Maybe I would really like to go and participate in seeing a conservative speaker, a federal judge who is a Trump appointee, who, you know, similar to who got shouted down at Stanford recently, because, you know, I would like to be part of the Q&A session. I would like to see the debate. I would like to see their feet held to the fire. I would like to see them justify their points of view. You shout them down at a university, you're not preventing their ideas from getting out there. You're making them these free speech defenders. You're making them, you're giving them this higher ground that they don't deserve. I feel like the real way to confront bad ideas is to really lay them out in the open and make them available to scrutiny. And I feel like this kind of screaming and crying and stamping of feet doesn't achieve any positive end whatsoever. And I see reports like this come out about how free speech has been diminished on college campuses and other types of things. And then I see the cognitive dissonance kick in and people start saying, well, we're not censoring free speech. we're talking about hate speech, and all of a sudden hate speech is defined to be anything they're offended by. You know, all of a sudden it's broadened into, you know, anything we disagree with has violent ramifications or is going to cause the death of certain groups of people or whatever. And it's not that we're against free speech, it's that this speech in particular is just that bad.
Yes.
And I just feel like it's indefensible. It's backwards. And you know, the most amazing part about it to me is how it really kicked into high gear during the Trump administration. And people were screaming for heightened restrictions on speech during the Trump administration. I think if there's one thing the Satanic Temple should be showing people, it's that these things cut both ways. If you're going to stand on principle, if you're going to open up public grounds to religious groups, you're going to have to deal with Satanists. If you're going to start censoring speech because you think that, you know, it's denigrating to your chosen tribe, you're going to have to accept the fact that they're going to say the same thing about the Satanic Temple. They're going to say the same thing about groups that try to shut down the speech of Catholic speakers. There's going to be a lot of debate as to who is actually the minority voice and who has the right to actually claim that something's hate speech against them. And that's going to be a never-ending battle as well. And it's just, I just feel like free speech is one of those things we need to defend on principle. We need to defend in total. You know, we do have reasonable restrictions when it comes to harassment, threats, and other such things. But I don't think there's any justification for broadening those restrictions to the point where we have these subjective analyses going on, claiming that, you know, the most mundane of offenses or the most idiotic of ideas is somehow violence against people, is somehow threats or harassment. Like there needs to be tangible, distinguishable, evenly applied delineations here. And it's one of the saddest things to me to see that that's kind of slipped away from people. And I don't think that one side is any better than the other at this right now.
Oh, I agree.
And that is a real scary thing.
It's just everyone's just got paper thin skin and just in the corner huffing and puffing and got their fingers in. And then speaking of like harassment and threats, no one has had more experience with that than you. From bounties on your head to famously a guy wearing a T-shirt that said nothing but God coming up to the Salem headquarters and trying to set it on fire. Yeah, right,
but people still have the audacity to tell me that, you know, my position on free speech comes from a place of privilege where I don't really understand what it means to be part of a denigrated population. And and that just shows how blind they are to realities that don't go outside of their prescribed notions of who's who and who's the minority group, who has to deal with these types of things and who doesn't, how inflexible their minds are, and how much polarization has kind of ossified their thinking in ways that make them completely irrational. But you're right. I deal with this all the time. I deal with people saying, they're going to kill me when I come to speak. Yeah. You know, there's people, and every time we do try to do an event, every time I do try to speak, there are groups, usually Catholic groups, claiming that what we're doing is hate speech against them. And to be honest, they have a credible claim if any of these other campus groups have a credible claim as well.
Jesus Christ.
When I was in university, my favorite part about speakers coming to campus was not going. Right. When did that stop? When is everyone suddenly so passionate about the people coming to speak at campus? Unless it's required for a class, like who cares?
I've never heard of Milo Yiannopoulos until there was all this outrage about him on campuses, and then fires started getting lit, windows getting broken. They turned him into a household name.
Yeah.
And now they claim that they deplatformed him. In fact, that didn't happen. Them protesting against him really elevated him. It made him a celebrity.
Gave him a
platform. And what actually shut him down was that he kept talking, was that people kept hearing what he was saying. And then at some point, he started saying things that sounded like they were justifying pedophilia. And that's when his own market couldn't tolerate him anymore. And then he really sunk to the bottom. And now you have people saying, well, see, deplatforming works. And that's not what happened. They didn't deplatform him. They made him a household name. And what really shut him down eventually was him not keeping his mouth shut. He just kept going. And then people saw that he was offensive no matter what side of the spectrum you were on.